So good morning. I'm Mark Williams. I'm here with Dean Martinez, the CEO of DRI. And Dean, glad that you could join us here today. What we'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about your one-year anniversary as the CEO at DRI, talk about some of the challenges that you've been facing over the last year, and get to know you a little better since because of the pandemic, a lot of our members haven't had an opportunity to actually meet you yet. But hopefully we are near the end of this remote learning process, and maybe we can be in person for seminars here coming up pretty soon. Are you a Chicago guy originally?
Born and raised and never left, even during my schooling. So true Chicagoan, born actually within the inner city of Chicago itself, moved to the suburbs as a child, went to college here in Chicago, local Chicago college, as well as law school in the Chicagoland area. Yes.
Now, you've been at DRI for about a year in this CEO role, which we're going to talk about here in a minute in terms of what all that entails. But you came to DRI from another organization where you had probably, I would say, a similar responsibility, but it was a different kind of organization. Is that right?
That's correct. Actually, I came from an organization that when I joined it, its name was Apex, and then it later on changed its name to ASCM, which is the Association for Supply Chain Management. I joined that organization as general counsel, actually. So I did, traditional general counsel work. It's a larger organization, about 46,000 members, in a significantly larger budget. And throughout the years, I was there for about 11 years, Mark. And as I was there, I grew in different responsibilities. And by the time I was able to join DRI, I was still general counsel, but I was also chief operating officer. So I had taken over the operations and many of the business functions as well.
So how did you get into that? That's essentially an in-house role. So you were an in-house lawyer there at that organization. How did you get into that path following law school?
That's it. I have an interesting legal path, probably like many of our members, that it took many different directions. So when I left law school, I immediately joined a state's attorney's office, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office here in Illinois. It's actually the largest prosecutorial office in the country from a state level. And I was there for just about under 4 years. And I went up the ranks there from an entry-level position, where I did appeals, I did traffic. But by the time I left, I actually was doing narcotics. I was in the Narcotics Bureau. And we actually had what hopefully many of you watched when you were growing up, or as I did, in the TV show Night Court. I actually ran a night court, and by the way, it's very similar to the TV show. And I actually got to engage in that activity. But then an opportunity came to actually take a position with the state of Illinois itself in the governor's office. And there was a department called Department of Financial Institutions that did a lot of the regulatory activities for the state of Illinois for the finances, finance companies. And so I took an opportunity there as a chief legal counsel. So that's kind of where my first, I guess, quasi in-counsel opportunity came in. And I was chief legal counsel and legislative affairs director for that department. And I was there with the state for approximately 6 years. And I rose in the ranks there and eventually became secretary of the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. So I was a cabinet level position. And that is the head regulator for the entire state of Illinois for all professions, except for lawyers and pilots and plumbers. I don't know why plumbers aren't there, but so we didn't regulate. But from massage therapist to your doctor, we regulated those professions. And there, actually, it's interesting on how opportunity comes sometimes years later after an engagement. That organization, oftentimes, as a lot of our members probably do too, we hire consultants for different activities. And one of the consultants we hired during my time at the state ended up becoming CEO of Apex. And when the opportunity arose, I was actually being interviewed to take a position at a large consultant company. And I called, my now who I call my mentor, who was the CEO of the organization, to ask him questions about, what should I expect if I join this large consulting firm? At the time, I had my second child was born, and we had a really wonderful call. And at the end of the call, he asked, he goes, "Hey, do you want to come by my office real quick? I want to talk to you about something." So I said, "Sure." So the next day, I went by his office, and he offered me a job to be his general counsel rather than go to the consulting firm. And that's kind of how it happened. And from that point forward, I really think I found my niche. The association world is a world that I truly love, and the opportunity to do something with my profession with DRI, which is something I could not pass up.
Well, that's an interesting background because you essentially you did trial work and on the criminal side, right?
Yep.
I don't know how many cases were tried, but you're doing courtroom work basically.
I don't know how many trials I did, but a lot of trials. I probably did a small trials probably every night. But what I would like to, if you don't mind, share with you my favorite legal experience was I had the very unique opportunity that one of my appeals actually made it to the Supreme Court of Illinois, and there was a rule that if you wrote the appeal, no matter how junior you were, you got to do oral arguments within the state's attorney's office, and I got to actually appear before the court. Not the full, one of the panels, not the full courts. I want to be honest, but one of the panels. And it's still to this day, very young in my career, in my most precious moment that I remember as an attorney that I really relish and cherish. That it was a great legal experience that I'll probably never forget. The only thing that comes close to it, but still a second, was my first jury trial win, right? Which I think all of us remember that. But that was. I just can't. It was a wonderful experience to really engage in legal discussion with some of the best minds in Illinois. It was great.
That is a great opportunity, especially as a junior lawyer, because these days it's so much harder for young lawyers to get experience like that. I mean, I do a lot of appellate work too. I've always done a lot of trial work, but for whatever reason, I have more appellate work these days. And I've got a pretty big group of people working for me that are doing appellate work, and I'm constantly looking for opportunities for them to get oral argument experience and that sort of thing. And it's hard. It's not easy.
And you know what? You could do whatever mock trial you want. It is not the same.
It's not the same.
And Mark, you know what's funny is that rule I shared with you, they were nervous. I was so junior that originally the supervisor at the state attorney's office wanted to take it away from me. And I was very lucky that I had a great supervisor in my division who really fought for me. And what they made me do was I had to do a mock hearing with them and prove that I can handle myself in the courtroom. You know what? That makes you a better lawyer, right? It's life, right? We all make these crazy mistakes.
Oh,
and I love them. They're the stories we tell.
Lawyer, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know to be nervous.
Right? I think I'm more nervous now when I get in front of people probably than I was back then. And I love the jury trial. There was something about connecting with those people in the room, and you figured out who you're trying to connect with. And even what you learn about people during the voir dire process and the importance of it. And everyone has their own theories on who they want on a jury and who they don't. I always had my theories about that. And they're never what the public thinks they are. It's not. It is so much more complicated about that. Anyways, and I think a civil one is very different than from a criminal one, but they're very similar measurement sticks. You know what you're looking for.
Right.
And we'll see what, and those are great discussions that I can share in those stories of with our members and really have a strong passion for it. I'm not the only lawyer in my family. My brother is also, he is a civil defense attorney in the state of Florida as well. He's my older brother. So I kind of followed in his footsteps.
What kind of litigation does he do?
So I know you're gonna be shocked by this, but he was first a state's attorney in Illinois. I know you're shocked by that. And then he went to Florida, and he actually ran the medical fraud unit for the state of Florida and their state attorney's office, which is a little bit different than Illinois. They actually are a /U.S. attorney as well, because in Florida, they in order for those cases, he had to have a U.S. attorney role as well. And that's what he did. And then he switched sides, and now he does a lot of defense on medical fraud and medical cases. So there's
a lot of that litigation. So tell us about your family, because
Sure.
you mentioned your brother and you mentioned one of your children. Tell us about a little bit about your family so we can get to know you.
Sure. I am actually celebrating 21 years of marriage this year. I was supposed to celebrate our 20th year and go to a really ritzy hotel and last year, but then of course that all got canceled.
Yeah, I can't do that.
No, okay, in May of last year. But I've been married for 20 years. I married my prom date, actually, not from prom, later on after law school. But I've been with my wife since high school. So it's my high school sweetheart. We've been together. I've gotten to a point with her where I don't even try to tell her something that isn't true because she knows it before it even comes out of my mouth. So we have this relationship together. And I have three wonderful kids. My oldest, who just turned 16 this year, which is this whole other moment. I'll tell you a story about that. I actually had to do an EC call while she was driving once because of this whole COVID situation, which was a scary call on a Zoom meeting while my 16-year-old daughter literally asked the question, am I supposed to be on the right side or the left side? She asked me that question during the EC. And they all got a good laugh of that one because I kind of freaked out. And then I have a daughter. My next child is a daughter who is in 7th grade, and then my baby or my son who's in 5th grade. So I have 3 kids, and I live here in the River Forest for the last 8 years.
Right,
it's been wonderful.
Tell us about how you ended up coming to DRI. What was it about the job, and how did that process go where you ended up being interested in the job at DRI?
Yeah, so as I indicated, I joined my former organization about now 12 years ago, but at the time about 11 years ago. But about a year before that, as you could imagine, my relationship with the CEO, who I indicated, he is a mentor of mine. He pulled me aside and said, listen, it's time for you to start looking. There's nothing more for you to learn. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, I want to support you. He goes, you can stay here as long as you want. And you are right now heir apparent of this organization, but I don't plan on leaving for a while. And right now we were gaining, we were gaining from you, prior to this, you were gaining from us all this great experience for you to be a future leader in any association you want to go to. We're on the opposite end of that tail now. You're giving to us because there's nothing more for you to learn. So we had a really great conversation. So he started he's very active in what's called the ASAE, the Association for Association Executives, and really trying to promote me as a future leader within the association world, but with no real rush. Things were going great. We kept on doing new opportunities, and every time I thought I was ready to leave, Mark, something else came up. When I was there, we did 3 mergers. How many association people can say they did 3 mergers? It doesn't happen too often. So it was really exciting work that I was doing, and then ironically, again, going back to sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I actually was not looking at this at the moment that the DRI opportunity came. We were working on another merger that was about to happen. And the DRI search organization that was hired by DRI, I should say, who was also named DRI, so that's why I said that,
Really?
reached out to me over LinkedIn and said, listen, we saw your profile, there's this opportunity, and you seem to be a very unique person and to look at this, and did a phone interview. And the idea, so at the time, Mark, I had turned down 2 other CEO jobs for associations. They just weren't right fits. And they just didn't, if it wasn't a right fit, I wasn't going to do it. So I wasn't sure if DRI was a fit, but the more and more I learned about it, and this opportunity, as I indicated earlier, to really be a part of an organization of my own profession, how do you turn that down? So really great fit. I spoke to the search committee, did additional research on the side. Literally, my former CEO did his own research as well, because he said, I'm not letting you go anywhere that I don't think is right for you. And it just, everything lined up, and it's a perfect fit. And the opportunity to really leverage what I've done in the past and now take it to DRI was just something I just felt like I had to do. And I can't tell you how excited I am to do it.
Now, your title is CEO. In the past, DRI's had executive directors. The last 2 had both served for quite a long time and had a lot of institutional knowledge and were legendary in their own way. So you have big shoes to fill, which I'm sure you know. But what's the difference from a practical standpoint in a CEO role versus an executive director role? And how did the decision go about to designate you with that title?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So there's really two different models, and the traditional model for any association, it's not just a DRI issue, was the executive director model. And what that model was, and you're seeing that change. If you were to look at other large associations, almost all of them are moving to a CEO model, and I'll explain why. So the traditional model, the executive director model, was very much built upon the premise of it's a volunteer-led organization that's supported by some staff. And then staff generally does what the volunteers are asking them to do. And that really makes sense, particularly at the onset of an association, regardless of what it is, whether it's a legal one or a non-legal one. It makes a lot of sense. And that is the historical manner in which almost all the associations we know today were born. But as we have grown and as the playing field has changed on what is competition to associations, the requirement to kind of shift to more of a professionally led organization that's supported by the volunteers and volunteer input has really come about. And if you look at almost all the larger associations, they have moved to that model. And why is that? Because now you have professionals that are giving advice to the volunteers on how we can grow the organization and get more members, get more involvement, have a better experience for our members. So you have a professional marketing person, you have a CEO that all they do is look at how do you run the operations of the organization, what are best business practices, thinking about it every day, 24 hours, twice on Sunday, versus a volunteer who's doing the best they can and doing great, but they can only think about it when they can because they have another job. You know, that's really the difference in the model. And that's what I'm trying to, over the last year, try to start laying the seeds to move to that model. You can't just turn a switch on this. This is something that's going to take many years to get to this new model. But what we're going to find is an organization that's going to provide a better product overall to our members. That's what it's all about. This is about how do we get more members, grow DRI to continue to be and to be even bigger leader within the civil defense arena, as well as provide more to our members, because our competition isn't other associations anymore. It's for profits. I'm not nervous when if you ask me, Dean, what are you concerned about with the future of DRI? It's not about other defense bars or other bar associations. It's the for profits that are moving into our space that we have to compete with, and they do run on a business model. So we need to be able to compete with them and make sure that we're prepared for that battle that's coming our way. And this isn't just a DRI issue. All associations are facing this now.
All right. So one of the things that was always part of DRI's strength was the commitment of the volunteers, which I'm sure you've seen over the last year. You'll see it even more once we go back to in-person programming. But how do you balance that tradition of volunteer engagement that drives an organization with the need to modernize it and make it a professionally run organization with a CEO and professional staff that you described?
I actually, and again, I can tell you that I saw it happen. So the previous organization that I joined, we literally did that transition as well. So when I joined it, the CEO had just joined, and he had to change it from an executive director or volunteer-led organization to a CEO model. So I've actually been able to not only do it myself, but I can tell you what happened there, and I envision it happening at DRI as well. What ended up happening is you're going to end up with actually more volunteer involvement. So here's the thing. There is no way do we envision that our association or any association can function with just a paid staff doing all the roles that volunteers take. It actually, you wouldn't be profitable. It's impossible. What we're hoping, or what I'm hoping, what we're going to end up having is more volunteer involvement, but in a different way. Rather than the volunteer being worried about what I would see as being more operational things, or oftentimes called being in the weeds, they could get involved in more policy decision areas of substance, things that they really care about that actually have a bigger impact. Because now they're not burning resources or time on operational things. They're now being involved on areas and decisions and things that we should be focusing on that actually could make a huge impact for the profession as a whole. So not just for DRI, but for the profession as a whole. And that's where we see the opportunity where, in fact, we're not going to see less volunteer involvement. What I fully anticipate is more volunteer involvement, but really at a different level, and one that I think and I hope will be more impactful, both for the volunteer, because they're going to really enjoy that, versus, and also for the membership and the organization as a whole.
Oh, and how has the past year gone from your perspective?
Yeah, as you could imagine, very challenging. The example I gave to the board and to the executive committee is, when I joined DRI and I was planning on joining DRI, pre-pandemic, the plan was I'm going to be joining a premier bar association that has a gold standard in face-to-face activities and events or networking events, that I need to add some virtual experiences to grow the business, to immediately overnight become a virtual company that hopes face-to-face comes back. I mean, that was a shock to the system, as any of you guys could imagine.
Sure.
But what I found was, one, incredible response, even though sometimes bumpy, let's just be honest, right? Bumpy, from our volunteers, of openness, of realizing the situation we were in. The membership, although every association, this is not a DRI unique issue, all associations are struggling with membership. Our membership held firm in 2020, even in the pandemic. We had some loss, but no more than any previous year. In fact, we outperformed what we thought we were going to do during the reforecast based upon the pandemic numbers. So we are seeing strength in our membership, but what we are realizing is that it also gave us an opportunity to really ask a lot of questions of, well, the common answer, I'm sure during your presidency and all your years at DRI, that's how we always done it. Well, the pandemic gave us.
That drives me crazy. I hate that. When somebody says, we've always done it that way, I'm like, that's the worst reason you could give me to do it that way.
It's funny you say that. I told staff that the first thing that comes to my mind is I don't want to do it that way then. Like, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. That's your answer. But it really allowed us to ask the question of, okay, but we can't do it that way anymore because the world has changed. And so it did give us some opportunity to tackle what I would say procedural things or operational things and to ask some questions, but it also created a lot of challenges. It is very difficult to create trust in a Zoom environment. It is very difficult to develop a relationship with someone. I have not met any of the board members, let alone the members of the organization, but even the board directors, or 90% of the EC face-to-face.
So most lawyers think that the profession has changed, that this is one of those critical events that will forever change how we do business, that we will not ever get back to whatever normal is and say, okay, we're going to be operating the same way we did in January of 2020. What about DRI? Is the future, if you're looking out over the horizon, is the future getting back to the same sort of DRI that we knew before, or is it going to be inherently different?
A lot of what we've known about DRI will return. We know that where DRI's biggest value proposition to our members, outside of all the other membership benefits, is our face-to-face seminars. Those seminars provide not only CLE, but also very important networking opportunities. That is going to return, and we know that's still going to be our main focus. There is going to also be a lot more focus on what can we do virtually that can benefit or support these networking opportunities or our CLE opportunities that we do face-to-face. So it's not going to be to replace it, but what we have found, and we believe we have identified some really good opportunities. And I'll give you a great example. One of our biggest areas, even before pre-pandemic or before I joined the organization, that was raised by our members, that was a challenge for them, was when a new person would go to a seminar and walking into that reception and trying to find an icebreaker How do I actually start talking to people?
Right.
And even though all of us lawyers pretend that we have these, incredible egos, and
That's awful. It's terrifying.
it is really hard, especially when you walk into a DRI event where there's lots of people who've known each other for years.
Right.
You're really trying to break into an arena where these people really know each other. How do you start conversation? Well, imagine if I have virtual events that take place pre-seminar. So I have this virtual opportunity where we have a Zoom meeting or a Zoom discussion before that seminar. And what we found, and this is actually coming from members, that they found it is a lot easier on a Zoom call to strike up a conversation with you or to send a chat to you. That now we think that if we do this, when you walk into that room, you will see someone you know, or at least someone you met. Now it's virtual, it's a little different, but it's much easier to go, hey, Mark, I talked to you on that Zoom meeting on whatever date, how's it going? That's a much easier icebreaker. We do think that the Zoom or the virtual experience could be a great additive to our in-person event. Additionally, what a great lead gen opportunity too. We have over 50% of our attendees to our virtual events had never been to a face-to-face.
Yeah, well, and another reason that I think that some level of virtual programming is going to be valuable is that I remember being back in the days when we were planning seminars and people would be brainstorming about potential topics. And what drove the topic generally was, could we get 200 people in the seats? Mm-hmm. And if we couldn't get 200 people in the seats, then we didn't do it. But there were lots of great ideas, emerging trends, things that were coming up in the law. But because of the cost associated and the risk of setting a meeting in a city, in a ballroom, at a hotel, if we couldn't get 200 people there, it really wasn't worth it to try it. But with a virtual program, you could take some of those more niche ideas and run them at relatively low cost. And that provides a much broader depth of experience for the membership when they see something like, oh, I read an article that's an emerging trend. That's something I should learn about. And they can pay whatever it is, $150, $200 to attend that virtual seminar and get that benefit. And the organization can do it without the risk of running that big seminar and losing money at it.
So another thing that I'm very focused on working with the team and with all the volunteers is we're not doing content for content's sake. DRI's name is about the gold standard. It's about we put on good content. And what we put out there is not just content to fill your CLE credit. It's because it's valuable. And we're going to be committed to that as well, Mark.
And that's the tradition of DRI is excellence in programming. In fact, most people that go to a DRI seminar for the first time, they're blown away by it. I'm like, wow, this is really significantly better than anything else they've done. And frankly, I tell my people especially young lawyers that work for me, you're not going to a DRI seminar just to get educated. You can get that in a lot of different places. You're going for the experience, to build your network, to make contacts, develop your professionalism as a lawyer. And all those sort of things are unique in many ways to DRI seminars. And I can't wait to get back to that experience.
I can't wait to go to one.
Well, Dean, this has been a great conversation. We've gone a lot longer than I think we were planning on it, but I could talk to you for another hour easily about a lot of things, and maybe we'll do another one of these someday. But I want to thank you for the opportunity to chat with you today and for people to get to know you a little bit better. And I look forward to meeting you in person.
I very much look forward to doing with you and with all the volunteers and members of DRI as we go forward. And I look forward to continuing those traditions at DRI.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.